The heavy wooden doors of the courtroom creak open as Marcus steps inside his cane, tapping softly against the polished floor. His face is calm, but there is a quiet fire in his eyes that refuses to die. Every step he takes is slow, deliberate, a reminder of the price he paid serving his country. The room is packed with curious spectators, some whispering as they glance at the worn-out military jacket draped over his shoulders. Across the room sits a sleek, expensive lawyer in a tailored suit. Beside him, the landlord, a smug man in his 50s, with perfectly combed hair, leans back in his chair with an air of arrogance, as if the outcome of this case is already decided. The judge, a stern-faced man with glasses perched on the bridge of his nose, barely glances at Marcus before shuffling his papers. The air feels thick with judgment as the landlord's lawyer rises to speak, his voice smooth and confident. Your Honor, this case is simple. The tenant has repeatedly violated the lease, he has failed to pay rent on time, and he has ignored property rules. We are simply asking for a lawful eviction, nothing more, nothing less. As the lawyer speaks, Marcus stands silently, his fingers tightening around his cane. The judge nods along, barely paying attention to Marcus, as if he is nothing more than a minor inconvenience. The lawyer's tone grows bolder as he emphasizes that Marcus has been nothing but a burden on the property, and his disability is no excuse for breaking the law. The landlord smirks, leaning closer to his lawyer, whispering something that makes them both chuckle under their breath. To them, Marcus is already beaten, just another broken man with no resources, no power, no chance of winning the case. The judge clears his throat, glancing briefly at Marcus, his tone dismissive. Do you have anything to say in your defense, Mr. Walker? Marcus lifts his head, meeting the judge's gaze. His voice is steady, calm, but there is a weight behind his words. Your Honor, I understand the law better than you think. And with that, he reaches into his worn leather bag, pulling out a thick folder of meticulously organized documents. The courtroom falls quiet as the papers hit the wooden table with a dull thud. I served my country for 15 years. Marcus continues, his voice unwavering. I was injured protecting the freedoms we all enjoy, and when I came home I expected to be treated with dignity and respect. But instead I have faced harassment, discrimination, and illegal treatment from this landlord. The judge raises an eyebrow, clearly surprised by Marcus's composed delivery. The landlord shifts uncomfortably in his chair, his smile fading as Marcus flips through his documents. These are records of every request I made for disability accommodations, all of which were ignored, and these. Marcus pauses to hold up a separate stack of papers, are federal laws that protect tenants with disabilities, laws that my landlord has chosen to violate time and time again. The judge, who had barely acknowledged Marcus before, now leans forward with renewed interest, while the landlord's lawyer shifts uneasily, trying to hide his growing concern. Marcus continues without missing a beat, his words sharp and deliberate. I have documentation of every maintenance request I filed, every violation I reported, and every attempt this landlord made to intimidate me into leaving. But I did my research, I know my rights, and today I will prove that no one is above the law, not even him. The landlord's lawyer shifts his weight from one foot to the other, trying to maintain his air of confidence, but there is a flicker of unease in his eyes as Marcus stands firm. Across the room, Your Honor, the lawyer begins in a smooth, rehearsed tone. While we respect Mr. Walker's service to this country, that does not exempt him from following the rules. The terms of the lease are clear, and my client has been more than patient. He glances at the landlord, who nods with a self-satisfied smile. My client has given Mr. Walker multiple warnings and ample time to correct his behavior, but instead of complying, he has chosen to make unfounded accusations and disrupt the property. Marcus remains silent, his face unreadable as the lawyer continues, trying to paint him as a troublesome tenant, someone who hides behind his disability to avoid responsibility. The lawyer flips through a glossy binder displaying notices of late payments and lease violations, carefully organized to make Marcus look irresponsible. This is not a case of discrimination, Your Honor. This is a clear violation of a legal contract, and we simply ask that the court uphold the law. The lawyer finishes with a practiced smile, as if the outcome is already decided. The judge nods, slightly appearing to agree, before turning back to Marcus, who stands unmoved, his grip on the cane tightening. Mr. Walker, do you dispute these claims? The judge asks, his tone calm, but distant as if he has already heard 1,000 cases like this. Without hesitation, Marcus steps forward, his voice steady. I do, Your Honor, and I have the evidence to prove that my landlord has been acting unlawfully. The courtroom, which had been buzzing softly, falls silent again as Marcus lifts another stack of papers. These documents show every attempt I made to resolve the issues peacefully, he says, his voice clear and unwavering. Why they accuse me of breaking the rules, the truth is they have been breaking the law, and I refuse to be intimidated. The judge watches with growing interest as Marcus moves with deliberate care. His body may be broken, but his mind is sharp. These are official maintenance requests. He continues, holding up a series of forms, all dated and signed. These prove that I repeatedly asked for necessary accommodations due to my disability, including the installation of a wheelchair ramp and regular maintenance on the faulty plumbing. Instead of addressing these concerns, they ignored me and then began to retaliate when I refused to stay silent. He pauses, letting his words sink in before pulling out another folder. And this, Your Honor, is the federal law that protects disabled tenants from discrimination and harassment. The landlord's smile falters, his confidence beginning to crack as Marcus speaks with the precision of someone who has prepared for every possible attack. The judge leans forward, his interest now fully captured as Marcus points to a specific statute under the Fair Housing Act which explicitly protects disabled individuals from eviction or retaliation when requesting accommodations. This is not just about me, Your Honor. Marcus continues, his tone harder now. This is about holding landlords accountable when they break the law and take advantage of those they think cannot fight back. The landlord's lawyer tries to interrupt, but Marcus does not stop, his voice gaining strength with every word. I have documented everything. Every time they refused to make repairs, every time they ignored my legal rights, and every threat they made against me. He lifts a small black device in his hand. And this, Your Honor, is a recording of my landlord threatening to evict me because of my disability. The courtroom stirs with whispers as the judge's face hardens. Suddenly, this case no longer seems simple, and the man they all underestimated now holds all the power. The judge adjusts his glasses, leaning forward as Marcus holds the recording device in his hand. The entire courtroom feels heavier as the air thickens with tension. Play the recording, Mr. Walker, the judge says. His voice no longer dismissive, but curious. Marcus presses a button, and the room fills with the cold, sharp voice of the landlord. I do not care about your disability, the landlord's voice echoes through the courtroom. If you cannot follow the rules, you can pack your things and leave, or I will make your life so difficult you will want to leave on your own. The words hang in the air like a heavy weight. As murmurs ripple through the crowd, the judge's expression darkens, while the landlord's lawyer shifts uncomfortably, glancing at his client, who now looks pale and tense. Marcus lets the recording finish before speaking again. Your Honor, this is just one example of the harassment I have endured since requesting basic accommodations. I served this country with honor, and when I returned I expected to live with dignity, but instead I have been treated like a nuisance simply for asking for the rights I am legally entitled to. He steps forward slightly, his cane tapping softly against the floor. This man believes that, because I am disabled, I am weak. But today I will prove that no one is above the law, not even him. The judge remains silent for a long moment before finally speaking. Mr. Walker, these are serious allegations, and this recording raises significant concerns. Do you have any additional evidence to support your claims? Marcus does not hesitate. He reaches into his bag, pulling out a thick binder of documents, which he hands to the bailiff with quiet confidence. These documents contain records of every maintenance request I submitted, every time I asked for basic repairs, and every time I was ignored. They also include correspondence where the landlord's office refused to acknowledge my disability and even suggests that I find another place to live. The bailiff delivers the binder to the judge, who begins flipping through the pages, his face growing more serious with every document. The landlord's lawyer tries to regain control. Your Honor, while Mr. Walker's claims are compelling, I must remind the court that he is still in violation of the lease, and my client is within his legal rights to pursue eviction. However, the judge raises a hand, silencing the lawyer for the first time, his voice sharper. I will decide what is legally appropriate, counselor. Marcus stands quietly, his posture straight, despite the pain he feels every day. The judge continues to review the documents, his expression becoming more severe as he reads through the detailed records of a note maintenance and repeated refusals to accommodate Marcus's disability. After several long moments, the judge sets the binder down, folding his hands together. Mr. Walker, your knowledge of tenant law is impressive, he admits, his voice quieter now, and it is clear that you have taken every legal step to resolve this matter before coming to court. The landlord shifts in his seat, his earlier arrogance slipping away as the weight of Marcus's evidence becomes undeniable. Marcus does not smile, he does not gloat. Instead, he waits patiently, knowing that the truth is finally being heard. The judge turns his attention back to the landlord, his voice cold and direct. Do you have any explanation for this pattern of behavior, sir? The landlord opens his mouth to speak, but no words come out, and in that silence, the entire courtroom realizes the truth. This veteran they underestimated is about to win. The courtroom hangs in silence as the judge's question lingers. The landlord fumbles with his tie, his face pale and tense. Your Honor, he starts, his voice shaky. I was simply enforcing the rules of my property. This is nothing personal. But the judge raises a hand, cutting him off, his expression cold and unyielding. The evidence suggests otherwise, Mr. Reynolds. This is not just about enforcing rules. This is about your clear and repeated failure to comply with federal law. Marcus stands tall, his face calm, but his sharp eyes never leave the landlord's. Every shift in his seat, every twitch of his fingers, reveals his growing panic. The judge flips through more pages, shaking his head as he comes across a letter from the landlord's office, refusing to install a wheelchair ramp, despite Marcus's multiple written requests. Mr. Walker, I see here that you made this request over a year ago, and it was denied without any legal grounds. Is that correct? Marcus nods, his voice steady. That is correct, Your Honor. Not only did they deny my request, but shortly after I filed a formal complaint, I began receiving notices threatening eviction for minor issues that had never been raised before. The landlord's lawyer shifts in his seat, trying to maintain his composure. Your Honor, we believe Mr. Walker is exaggerating these claims, he says, his voice losing its earlier smoothness. The landlord did nothing unlawful, and these accusations are an attempt to avoid the consequences of his lease violations. But Marcus is ready. Before the lawyer can continue, he raises another document. And this, Your Honor, is a signed affidavit from a former tenant of the same property who faced similar harassment after requesting disability accommodations. The judge's face hardens as the bailiff delivers the document to him. The landlord's face drains of color as Marcus speaks again. I tracked down multiple former tenants, Your Honor, all of whom experienced the same pattern of intimidation and neglect from this landlord. This is not an isolated incident. This is a repeated violation of the Fair Housing Act. The courtroom murmurs grow louder as the weight of Marcus's evidence crushes the landlord's carefully crafted lies. The judge taps his gavel once, silencing the noise, before turning his attention back to the landlord. Mr. Reynolds, the judge says, his voice colder now, do you deny the claims made in this affidavit? The landlord opens his mouth to speak, but no words come out. For the first time, his confidence is completely shattered. Marcus stands still, his grip on the cane tight, but his face remains calm. After everything he has endured, he refuses to let this man break him. The judge's eyes narrow as he watches the landlord squirm in his seat. I remind you, Mr. Reynolds, the judge continues, that perjury in this court carries severe consequences. If you continue to deny these allegations in the face of overwhelming evidence, you will face further legal action. The landlord swallows hard, his jaw clenching as he stares down at the table, unable to meet the judge's gaze. Marcus does not look away, his resolve unshakable. After years of fighting battles, both on and off the field, he knows what it means to stand his ground. The judge sighs heavily as if the weight of the case is finally pressing down on him. It is clear to this court that Mr. Walker's rights were repeatedly violated, and that your actions, Mr. Reynolds, were not only unethical but also illegal. And I am not finished hearing this case. The landlord's shoulders slump as the reality sets in. and for the first time the power dynamic shifts completely in Marcus's favor. The courtroom remains tense as the judge's words hang heavy in the air. The landlord sits frozen, his once confident posture now replaced by slumped shoulders and a clenched jaw. Marcus stands firm, his cane steady, as if it is the only thing anchoring him to the moment, but his voice remains strong and clear. Your Honor, he says calmly, there is more evidence that reveals the true nature of this landlord's behavior. He reaches into his worn leather bag, pulling out another envelope, and hands it to the bailiff. The judge takes the envelope, opening it with a quiet rip, and his face tightens as he scans the contents. These are letters from other tenants, Marcus explains, his tone measured. They describe the same pattern of harassment, threats, and refusal to accommodate their legal rights. The judge flips through the pages, his jaw tightening with every word, while the landlord shifts nervously in his seat. The lawyer clears his throat, attempting to regain control. Your Honor, he says with forced calm, these claims are unsubstantiated and lack the proper legal basis for such a serious accusation. But the judge does not look at him, his focus remains on the evidence piling against the landlord. Mr. Walker, the judge says after a long pause, these letters suggest a repeated pattern of misconduct, stretching back several years. How did you obtain these statements? Marcus straightens his back, the weight of years of struggle pushing against him. I took the time to speak to other tenants, Your Honor. After realizing I was not the only one being targeted, I knew I had to gather evidence and stand up not just for myself, but for others who felt powerless. He says, his voice unwavering. These letters were voluntarily given by tenants who were too afraid to speak out on their own. The landlord's face is now pale, his hands trembling slightly as the judge continues reading the testimony. These letters describe a systematic effort to intimidate tenants who request legally required accommodations. The judge says, his voice colder now, and it appears Mr. Walker is not the first to face these tactics. This deeply troubles the court. The landlord's lawyer stands quickly, trying to salvage what little control they have. Your Honor, he says with forced politeness, there is no direct proof that my client personally sanctioned these actions. He is a busy man and handles many properties. Surely there must be some misunderstanding. Marcus does not flinch. He steps forward slightly, his cane tapping against the floor. Before the judge can respond, I anticipated that argument, he says, his voice razor sharp. So I obtained one more piece of evidence. He pulls a small flash drive from his pocket and holds it up. This contains emails directly from the landlord's personal account, instructing his staff to ignore my requests and to pursue eviction as soon as I became too much trouble. The lawyer's face drains of color as the judge gestures for the bailiff to collect the flash drive. The courtroom falls into stunned silence as the judge examines the new evidence, his expression growing darker with each passing moment. Ms. Reynolds, he says, his tone dangerously quiet, you personally ordered the denial of legal accommodations and explicitly instructed your staff to retaliate against a disabled veteran. Do you deny this? The landlord's mouth opens, but no sound comes out. He looks trapped, his earlier arrogance now a distant memory. Marcus watches him with quiet satisfaction, knowing that for the first time in a long time the truth is finally winning. The courtroom is so quiet that every breath, every shift in a seat feels louder than it should. The landlord's face is pale, his hands trembling slightly as the weight of the evidence crushes the last remnants of his arrogance. The judge's eyes remain fixed on the flash drive, his jaw tight as he absorbs the damning contents of the emails. After a long heavy pause, he finally speaks, his voice cold and sharp. Mr. Reynolds, this court takes these actions very seriously. Instructing your staff to retaliate against a disabled tenant is not just unethical, it is illegal, and this evidence leaves little room for misunderstanding. The landlord's lawyer rises again, trying to salvage the sinking case. Your Honor, while these emails are concerning, we must question the authenticity of this evidence. He says, though the confidence in his voice is fading, we cannot verify the source without a thorough examination. Marcus does not hesitate. I anticipated that, Your Honor, he says with the calmness of a man who knows he has already won. This flash drive also contains metadata that confirms these emails originated from the landlord's personal account, and I have a sworn affidavit from a former employee who was ordered to carry out these retaliatory actions. The judge's expression hardens as the bailiff delivers another set of documents to his bench. The landlord swallows hard, his face a mixture of anger and panic as he glares at Marcus across the room. But Marcus does not falter. His mind is as sharp as ever despite the pain that courses through his body. Every day he knows what is at stake, not just for himself, but for every tenant who has suffered in silence. The judge carefully examines the new evidence, and as each minute passes, the tension in the room grows thicker, until finally he looks up and fixes his cold gaze on the landlord. "Mr. Reynolds," the judge says slowly and deliberately, "the evidence before this court is overwhelming. Not only did you violate the Fair Housing Act by refusing reasonable accommodations, but you also engaged in a calculated effort to intimidate and evict a disabled veteran who was legally protected from such actions." The landlord shifts uncomfortably, his lawyer frantically whispering in his ear. But it is clear that nothing they say now can undo the damage Marcus has done. With the truth, the judge leans back in his chair, folding his hands together, as if weighing the gravity of the situation. "Mr. Walker, your preparation in this matter is both thorough and impressive," the judge continues, his voice softer, but no less serious. "Most tenants would not have known how to fight back at this level, let alone present evidence with such precision. You clearly understand your rights, and your knowledge of the law is exceptional." Marcus nods slightly, his face still calm, but there is a flicker of emotion in his eyes, a quiet satisfaction that comes from years of being underestimated finally coming to an end. The landlord's lawyer makes one last desperate attempt. "Your Honor, perhaps there is room for a settlement," he suggests, his voice tight. "We are willing to negotiate a resolution that is fair to all parties involved." But the judge is already shaking his head. "The time for negotiation has passed, Counselor. This court does not tolerate the abuse of power, especially against vulnerable individuals, and in this case, the facts are clear, the law is clear, and my ruling will reflect that clarity." The landlord lowers his head as the reality of his impending judgment begins to sink in, and for the first time the power is no longer his. The judge's words hang heavy in the air, the finality of his tone leaving no room for argument. The landlord sits stiff and pale, his once arrogant posture now reduced to a slumped shadow of defeat. His lawyer frantically scribbles notes, but even he knows there is little left to save this case. The courtroom watches in silence, captivated by the unexpected shift in power. Marcus remains steady, his grip on the cane firm, as the years of pain and injustice weigh against the satisfaction of finally being heard. "Mr. Walker," the judge continues, "your evidence is not only compelling, but it reveals a clear pattern of discrimination and retaliation. Your actions here today do more than defend yourself. They shine a light on misconduct that could have continued unchecked had you not fought back." Marcus meets the judge's gaze, unwavering despite the ache coursing through his body. "Your Honor, I did not come here to seek revenge. I came here to stand up for those who do not have the knowledge or strength to fight back against those who abuse their power," he says, his voice steady and calm. "Too many tenants, especially those with disabilities, live in fear of losing their homes because they do not know their rights." The judge nods slowly, his face softening with a rare trace of respect. "Mr. Walker, your commitment to justice is commendable, and this court will not allow such blatant violations to go unanswered." Turning his attention back to the landlord, the judge's expression hardens. "Miss Reynolds, this court finds that you knowingly and willfully violated the Fair Housing Act by denying reasonable accommodations and by engaging in a sustained campaign of harassment against Mr. Walker and other tenants. The evidence provided leaves no doubt as to your intent, and this court will impose appropriate legal consequences." The landlord shifts uncomfortably, beads of sweat forming on his forehead, his earlier bravado replaced by an air of desperation. "Your Honor, we never meant to cause harm," he begins, his voice shaky, but the judge's raised hand silences him. "Intention does not absolve you of responsibility, Ms. Reynolds. The law exists to protect those who cannot always protect themselves, and you chose to exploit that power imbalance for personal gain." Marcus watches the landlord squirm, but there is no satisfaction in his expression, only the quiet resolve of a man who has fought too many battles to celebrate too soon. The judge leans forward, his voice firm, and clear, this court orders that Ms. Walker's eviction proceedings be dismissed immediately with prejudice. Furthermore, Ms. Reynolds, you are required to make all reasonable accommodations as requested, including the installation of a wheelchair ramp within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in further legal penalties and additional sanctions. Marcus stands still as the words sink in. The fight he thought might never end is now tipping undeniably in his favor. And one more thing, the judge says, his voice coder still. This court is referring this case to the appropriate authorities for further investigation into your business practices and potential violations affecting other tenants. This is not simply about one man, it is about ensuring that no one else endures the abuse Ms. Walker has faced. The landlord's face crumples with disbelief, his lawyer's frantic whispers now point us against the weight of the judge's words. The balance of power has shifted, and for the first time in years, Marcus stands on the winning side. The courtroom is thick with tension as the judge's ruling settles over everyone. The landlord sits frozen, his face pale, and his hands trembling slightly. His lawyer leans in, whispering frantically, but it is clear to everyone that the damage is already done. Marcus stands tall, his cane steady beneath his hand. His body aches from the hours spent standing, but there is no sign of weakness in his expression, only quiet resolve and the satisfaction of knowing the truth has finally come to light. The judge's voice breaks the silence once more. Ms. Walker, your perseverance in the face of adversity is remarkable, and your ability to navigate the legal system with such precision is not something this court sees often. You have shown that no one is above the law, and your efforts will not go unnoticed. Marcus nods slightly, his face calm, but inside his heart pounds with the weight of years of struggle finally lifting from his shoulders. For too long, he had been dismissed, overlooked, and underestimated, but today that ends. Mr. Reynolds, the judge continues, your actions have not only violated federal law, but have caused undue hardship to a man who has already sacrificed so much for his country. The Fair Housing Act exists to prevent exactly the kind of behavior you have demonstrated, and it is the duty of this court to uphold those protections. Therefore, this court is also imposing financial penalties for your repeated violations. You will pay restitution to Ms. Walker to cover legal fees and emotional distress. The sum will be determined after further review, but rest assured it will be significant. The landlord's face drains of color, his hands clench into fists as the full weight of the judge's words hit him. Marcus watches the man who tried to break him reduced to nothing but a trembling figure in an expensive suit. There is no triumph in his heart, only the steady relief of knowing no other tenant under this landlord's control will suffer as he did. When I returned home from serving my country, I believed that my rights would be protected. Marcus says, his voice even but firm. Instead, I found myself fighting yet another battle, one I never expected to face. But I could not stand by while this man abused his power, and now he will finally be held accountable. The judge nods, his face serious and thoughtful. Justice is not simply about punishment, it is about restoring balance, and today, Ms. Walker, you have helped restore that balance. This ruling will serve as a message to every landlord who believes they are untouchable. The law applies to all, no matter their wealth or status. Marcus grips his cane tighter, his legs ache, but he refuses to sit down, not now, not when every moment has led to this. He stands in silent defiance against every person who ever doubted his strength. The landlord slumps further into his seat, the reality of his downfall sinking deeper with every passing second. His lawyer's voice is now barely audible as the judge speaks again. Mr. Walker, you are free to remain in your residence, and any future requests for accommodation will be handled under direct court supervision to ensure compliance. This case is far from over, Ms. Reynolds. Your business practices will be thoroughly investigated, and I assure you the consequences will reflect the seriousness of your actions. The gavel slams against the wood, the sound echoing through the courtroom as the judge delivers the final blow, and Marcus knows the battle he fought so hard to win is finally his. The gavel's echo fades, but its impact lingers. The courtroom buzzes with murmurs as people process the stunning reversal of power. Marcus stands firm, his cane planted against the floor. His body aches from the strain, but his spirit feels lighter than it has in years. He glances toward the landlord, whose once smug expression is now replaced by a hollow, defeated stare. The lawyer beside him speaks in frantic whispers, but the landlord barely responds the weight of the judge's words, pressing down harder with every passing second. Marcus takes a slow breath. The battle is over. But the memories of the struggle remain. Every letter he wrote, every sleepless night spent preparing his case, every moment of doubt, when it felt like the system would always favor the powerful. It all led to this moment, and he had refused to back down no matter how hard they tried to break him. The judge gathers his papers, preparing to leave the bench. But before he does, he turns back to Marcus, his expression softer but still serious. Mr. Walker, the courage and determination you have shown in this courtroom is extraordinary. Most people would have given up when faced with the obstacles you endured, but your refusal to be silenced has not only secured justice for yourself, but for others who may not have had the strength to fight. The judge pauses for a moment, as if waiting his next words. People like you remind us why these laws exist and why they must be enforced without exception. You have my respect and my gratitude. A flicker of emotion crosses Marcus's face, but he holds himself steady. Thank you, Your Honor, he says, his voice low, but filled with quiet pride. I only did what I knew was right for myself and for those who couldn't fight back. The judge nods once, and with a final glance at the defeated landlord, he steps away from the bench. The sound of the door closing behind him feels like the end of a long and painful chapter. As the courtroom begins to empty, Marcus takes a step forward, each movement heavy with exhaustion but light with relief. A reporter approaches him, her notebook in hand. Mr. Walker, your case has drawn a lot of attention. People are calling you a hero for standing up against this kind of discrimination. What would you say to others who are facing similar battles? Marcus meets her gaze, his expression thoughtful. I'm no hero, he says, simply I'm just a man who refused to be pushed aside. If you know your rights, don't be afraid to fight for them, no matter how hard they try to silence you. The landlord stumbles out of the courtroom, his once pristine suit wrinkled and his face pale. His lawyer hurries after him, but Marcus doesn't watch them leave. Their power over him is gone, and they are nothing more than shadows in his past. As he turns toward the exit, the sunlight streams through the courthouse windows, warming his face. For the first time in years, he feels free, truly free. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd has gathered, a few veterans among them, nodding in quiet respect. Marcus smiles faintly as he steps into the fresh air. The fight was never just about a wheelchair ramp or an eviction. It was about dignity, out proving that no one, no matter their wealth or status, has the right to take away another person's humanity. And as he walks away from the courthouse, his head held high, Marcus knows he has won not just for himself, but for everyone who will come after him.